meeting, as Howard said, is a collaborative thing. It's not a top-down platform speaker stuff. But you know, I would suggest that we basically maybe go back a few hours and pretend that actually the resolution, the amendment that said let's talk about the problems of setting a budget in these situations was actually passed. Or even if it wasn't passed, that we're going to do it anyway, because I think it's a discussion that needs to be had. I mean, I think everybody's pretty aware of the hard economics. I'd actually recommend Jason Kitcat's half-hour interview about the difficulties he's got, and he talks about £23.6 million cuts that need to be found, and the fact that services are likely to be starting to deteriorate, having done such a good job in 2 years in keeping those services together. So, you know, I would recommend people go on the Brighton website and have a look at that. But really, the point that we were trying to make in the resolution this afternoon, in the amendment this afternoon on the Flora conference, was this: that it's becoming increasingly impossible for a local authority, any local authority, even a local authority that is not run by people with the principles of the Green Party, it is becoming increasingly impossible for such a local authority to maintain not just everything that they would want to do, but essential statutory services. And they are basically carrying the can for the austerity agenda of the government. And there must come a point where local authorities, particularly a Green-led local authority, says, we are not prepared to do that bidding anymore, and maybe we should try a different strategy, one of resistance, even if it means that we have to give up the administration. That's been my view for some time. I mean, people have said there haven't been massive cuts. I don't know whether that's true or not. I'd be interested in people from Brighton commenting on that. I know that I had a conversation. I was very privileged to be invited to a meeting with Jason Kitcat and a couple of the other councillors soon after they came into power, whilst they were setting their first budget, convened by Red Pepper, and it was a very productive and comradely discussion. But I remember them talking about efficiency savings, and Jason in particular talking about not cuts, but efficiency savings. And one efficiency saving that he mentioned on that afternoon, which I've asked him about since, but I've not really had a reply, was we are not going to pay our private contractors an allowance for the time that it takes their home care workers to travel from address to address. We're not going to pay that. I have been worried ever since, particularly as the 0 hours contract debate has come out and the whole business about exploited people, and the most exploited workers in Brighton will include the people delivering home care for the council. I have been increasingly worried that actually that decision to withdraw the payment to the companies that allowed for the travelling time for their workers will have been passed on to their workers. Who would doubt that wouldn't have happened? I know nationally across the country it's being revealed as a scandal that people who work in the home care industry are on less than the minimum wage, because they get the minimum wage but they don't get paid for the 15 or 20 minutes that it takes between visits. Now, I don't know whether Brighton's culpable in that, because it was an early efficiency saving carried out by the Brighton Green administration. But that's one of the issues, that's one of the particular things that I want to talk about. But there are many, many specific issues, aren't there, to do with cuts and what's happened in Brighton and how they've survived and how they're going to survive for another 2 years or another 5 years, because Jason, again, has made it clear, don't expect it to be sorted when Labour get back in, because they've made it clear that they're carrying on the cuts agenda. So it's an horrendous situation that any council faces, particularly a Green council, and that's the discussion that I think the party needs to have. We tried to, with our amendment today, try to get that formally recognised by the party. The amendment was not passed, but let's begin to have that discussion tonight.
Okay, thanks very much, Ramsay. Just on the slide, Sean, you want to...
Okay, I just want to pull the focus back out a little bit. Have a slightly wider view, because I think that it's important that we see the current situation, not just in Brighton, because the councillor from Kirklees made the point that that there are other people elsewhere are in it's not quite such an acute situation of actually having titular control. That's all it is, titular control of the administration, but are involved. And so I think that we should be looking at the situation in terms of what the strategic priorities of the Green Party need to be across the board, rather than just seeing a series of discrete tactical problems or tactical crises that either some of us might see coming and others will just be hit with unexpectedly. And it seems to me that one of the things, if it isn't, well, it probably is a wild generalisation, but nonetheless, that's never stopped me in the past. Well, it seems to me that, in a sense, that if, for want of a better term, and I don't mean this disparagingly, the right within the Green Party tends to be absolutely hopeless as far as having any sort of strategy is concerned, strategically blind, whereas the left is sort of has got strategy up to its ears, but is absolutely bloody useless when it comes to tactics. What we actually do in a very specific situation, and it's because of that situation. I mean, that one of the tendencies of the left, obviously not shared by anybody here, is to go into this sort of the no passerelle mode, rip one shirt open and say, no, not another step. And whereas actually, if we think of ourselves as in a long-term guerrilla war, as it were, we have to always consider the balance of forces. Some particular battles we're going to win, some that we're going to lose, but the fact is that has to be within the context of an overall strategy. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to take on board is that there are no solutions to the problems that we're going to find ourselves with in any one area. Just as if socialism in one country was a chimera which was could never be found, socialism where the green, red or candy stripe in one borough is even less of an option. There is no way of saying we've got the magic bullet here that's going to solve our problems in any one particular area. What should our central priority as an organisation be? That we can then look at what at tactical approaches to how we develop things. And it seems to me that our overall, at this time, in such a rapidly changing situation that we face, after having experienced the greatest crisis that the economic system has faced in over a century, that in this situation, our central priority must be the building of a mass pluralist party capable of challenging the hegemony of the Labour Party as for the leadership of sort of progressive thought and organised labour in this country. It seems to me that we have to, and I mean it's a very grandiose perhaps a very grandiose sort of ambition to talk about, but we must see ourselves as trying to become the natural home for working class activists in the trade union movement, for middle class radicals and so on. And we have to realise that we certainly are not that party. We on our own are not going to be that party, but we can play, and we should be playing, a critical central role in enriching the struggle to build that mass movement. And it seems to me that in that context, if we look at that context, that therefore that whether in Brighton or on my patch, whether it's in a council or in a tenants association or a trade union branch, we have to look at what ways we can actually build the broadest possible alliance in action. We don't, and stop worrying about, as it were, the future of this or that organisation, because that's secondary.
Okay, thanks, Sean. I'd like to ask Dani to speak next.
Okay. No, I'm all right. Stand up. So I've been asked to talk about what's the impact of the cuts been in Brighton, and I'll talk about that in three different aspects. I can't cover everything. There's the direct impact of the cuts to the council's budget. There's the impact of the cuts to housing benefit, which are administered by the council, and there's also, I think, crucially, the impact on the ability of the left broadly in Brighton and Hove to actually build alliances and fight back, which has been fairly disastrous, I would say. So in terms of the council budget, as you probably know, we haven't had big ticket cuts that some authorities have seen. We've had no branch libraries closing, we've had no Sure Start centres closed and so on. We had no compulsory redundancies, as far as I know, so far. But there are two pretty large groups of people that have been directly affected by the administration's decision to present balanced budgets over the last 2 years. Council staff. The council's lost 250 posts over the last 2 years, and that's had a knock-on effect on everyone who works for the council. They're living under greater pressure of work, uncertainty of major restructuring, and obviously knock-on effects on the service delivery from that. And a bigger group, and a more vulnerable group, is the people that were previously entitled for council tax benefit. And along with most other local authorities in the country, Brighton and Hove are making everybody of working age pay something towards council tax. There's a limit of £3 a week on it in Brighton, but this still affects 17,000 households in the city. Obviously it's not evenly distributed across the town. In some wards, most of the wards, that's over 30% of the households are now having to pay something. In over 7,000 of those households there are children, 20% of the affected adults are disabled people. I'll come back to that in a minute, but moving on to the housing benefit cuts, we've seen about 14% of households in the city, also, not by coincidence, about 17,000 households, affected by one or more of the housing benefit changes that the Tories have brought in over the last 2 years. So the big cuts and restructuring of local housing allowance that's really affected people in Brighton. We've got a big private rental sector with high rents, the bedroom tax, and the overall benefit cap. And the average loss of income for those households, just from the housing benefit changes, is £1,500 a year. And obviously these are the poorest people in the city, and these are the same people that are being hammered for council tax on top of all that. Many of them are also being affected by the disability benefit changes, workfare sanctions, etc. So the cost to these individuals is enormous. I've been gathering stories from people affected by bedroom tax, and I'll just give you a couple of quotes from them. One woman said to me, "My home used to be a safe space, and now I'm frightened of what the next post will bring. I'm hearing lots of fear and anxiety from bedroom tax victims." Another woman said, "With a starting income of £71 income support, bedroom tax and council tax takes off £26 a week. After paying for utilities like gas, electricity, water and telephone, I'm left with £12.50 a week to live on, to cover food, transport and any other thing I might need." So this is the context in which Brighton and Hove are asking people to pay £3 a week council tax. Brighton and Hove has introduced a narrowly drawn no eviction policy for bedroom tax, but actually that doesn't do much to prevent that level of anxiety for people. It doesn't stop people being pressured to pay in all kinds of ways. But in terms of council tax, they are pursuing it really aggressively. They've sent out thousands of summonses with £100 court costs attached. Just finally, on the question of alliances, it seems to me that if people are going to be in elected office, then they need to keep asking themselves, who are you representing? Who are we representing here? Whose side are we on? And from where I stand, outside the party, outside the council, the administration has been listening too much to senior officers and not enough to frontline staff. They have failed to build on the alliances, the unions they started to create around the living wage. The disastrous bin dispute is the outcome of that failure. And so those alliances are pretty much smashed up now. And as campaigners, grassroots campaigners, we should have the feeling that we've got some of our people on the inside and we don't have that feeling. I think that the confrontational tone of the anti-cuts movement has contributed to this problem. And I think there's been a collective failure in Brighton to kind of open up a dialogue 2 years ago. And I think that's meant that the position of Green Party members in campaigns has been very difficult. People have been put on the defensive. It's been very difficult for them to act as an effective bridge between the unions and campaigners and the council, which is also a shame. But now is crunch time, as people have said already. There aren't any more efficiency savings to be squeezed from the council staff. To keep on presenting balanced budgets, you are now looking at really harsh cuts or privatisation. Now we really have to get down to it and talk to each other. We are getting the People's Assembly together in Brighton, and we urgently need to start a creative dialogue between anti-cuts voices inside and outside the council. So I welcome this discussion. I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, well, thank you for having me to come and chat. I thought that, as everyone else has, particularly Sean, I'd reflect particularly on today and the discussions around Brighton and its control. I understand just introduced it. There's a broader discussion about what the Green Party can do about cuts in general, but that's the debate we had today, and so we might as well talk about that. And I always think that whenever a group of people are disagreeing about something, it's important to take a step back and work out what the broader disagreement really is, because we could argue forever with Jason, etc., about the details of any particular cuts in Brighton and whether, given the context, it's feasible or not. But I think that's kind of missing the point. The point is a question of strategy. I think it's quite an important question of strategy for the party as a whole, and in a sense for the whole movement we're a part of as a whole. And so I think that that's the conversation I'd be keen to have, rather than getting bogged down in particular details around particular events in particular cities and so on. I think that the question is why we're here as a party, why we're here as a movement, what we can succeed in doing, what we can't succeed in doing, and how we're going to do those things. And whether succeeding or failing, and whether we're succeeding or failing at the moment. And I think I'm going to start off being depressing, because I think that it's quite clear to me that we're failing at the moment, both as a movement and as a party. So, as a movement, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the planet's burning, everything's getting worse, neoliberalism is entrenching, not declining after the financial crisis. It's all quite bad news. There's we can talk about individual bits of good news, but if we're all really honest, things are kind of shit. And then as a party, I think we also need to be honest that we're failing. We've been around for 40 years now. When Labour have been around for 40 years, they founded the NHS. I don't mean that means we should excuse what else Labour have done, but I think it's important to recognise that we now, in England, are the fifth largest party by council numbers. UKIP have not overtaken us. We have made very slow progress. The number of new councils we won last year was limited. If we look at real political power in the country, who has more power? We have a council administration, but who has more power, us or UKIP? I think the answer is clear. And I think we need to think about the implications of why it is that we're failing. I think we also need to be clear that we have a real risk of not going forward slowly, too slowly, but of going backwards. I think that you need only to look at examples across the country of where Lib Dems have worked their socks off for 20 years to get an MP. They've won a council administration by mistake and they've lost that MP. Just about, until they entered a coalition in 2015, it's just about the only way that Lib Dems have lost seats and actually targeted them is going to council administration, fucking things up, not just because of their own mistakes, but sometimes because of central government decisions, and then losing MPs. And I don't think we're going to lose Caroline. There's a good polling out today saying we're not going to lose Caroline, but there's a genuine risk of that. But I think that if we do lose our only MP after 40 years, we really failed as a party. I think we need to be serious about that. And that means, as a whole party, we should be taking very serious care about this broader question, what's our strategy? How are we going to make not the steady progress, but the great leap forward, green leap forward? And that's a difficult question, and I don't know the answer to it. So I'm not going to talk much longer. But I do have a couple of thoughts on it. The first is our strategy really taking control of city councils? Because city councils have some power, but since about 1973, in 1973, Jimmy Reed, the leader of the Glasgow Shipbuilding Union, gave a great speech to Glasgow University. You should go and read it. It's a famous speech. But he argued at the time against the massive centralisation of power by Westminster from city councils in 1973. This process has been going on a long time, and it's continued, and it's continued, and it's continued, to the point where city councils no longer have any serious, massive powers. They can make important decisions about people's lives in terms of the strategic decision-making power, almost all that imposed on them by the Department of Communities and Government. Are we saying, as a party and as a movement, that our main priority is to take very weak political institutions? I don't think it is. I think that's foolish. And if that risks other things, as we know that it does from the example of Lib Dems, like getting MPs who do have genuine power, and you can, through the media and through the rest of politics, change the shape of the debate in our country, then do we really want to take that risk? I'm not quite sure that we do unless we get a massive benefit from it. And so I think that that's a difficult question for local bodies to ask, but we should be serious about that, because it's a huge threat to our role in a broader movement, and that broader movement is failing unless we can contribute to it, then we're going to fail even more. And then I thought that I'd just finish with something that was said in a previous session, a slightly odd session we had about what we can learn from UKIP, and the basic conclusion of that was that what we can learn is to talk about our values more, and talk about policy less. And Neil Lawson, from the much more centrist and maybe much of Green Lefty's think tank Compass, gave what I thought was quite a nice quote, a piece of advice to the party, and I thought that, given that many of you might not have been there, I should repeat it, which is that he said that we shouldn't get bogged down in focusing on targeting particular council wards and so on. What we should do is start from the dream, start from the vision, and the votes will follow. And I think that's right. I think that what he was saying is that UKIP succeed because they look not like a party but like a movement, and at a time people are angry, that's what people go for. And I think that that's important advice. We should listen to it. Start from the dream, start from the vision, and the votes will follow.
Okay, so as we said right at the beginning, the whole point of this meeting is to have a discussion. So this is not really about asking questions of the speakers or anything like that. It's about people contributing their ideas